Welcome, witches, wizards, and muggles alike, to another enchanting episode of Magical Tales from the Slytherin Common Room, bringing your favorite Harry Potter fanfiction to audio format. So sit back, relax, and Accio headphones, and let the magic begin.
Apostasy by Deydralinne, Chapter 20, Musical Beds. Her eyes shifted back to Tiberius, narrowing on the man. She should have let the spell hit her. He could have taken himself out, but it was instinct to deflect it, especially when it come to curses like Avada Kedavra. His face contorted in annoyance before he also disappeared. Her eyes were left to roam over the debris that scattered around, a cackle of flames slowly eating its way through the empty shops. The heat in here was stifling, and the sweat dripped down the back of her neck. "For fuck's sake," Draco groaned. "What?" Ginny crouched and revived Blaze. Hermione really had to get to work on those bloody rings. Too many things today had been a close calls, proving just how necessary they would be. She glanced back at the empty spot where Tiberius had been. If she had been more focused on Kingsley just then, Theo would be dead. There was no one else to blame either. They had all been doing the best they could, fighting multiple people on multiple fronts. And to be fair, to date, the Order had never pulled a stunt like that, so she had not anticipated seeing her own spell being used against her like that. "We're being summoned," Blaze mumbled as he tried to sit up, rubbing his head where he had knocked it against the hard floor. "Granger, what are you going to do about this?" Pansy waved towards the fiery monsters. Hermione felt the anger of it all and let it run through her veins like the beast running through the complex. "Leave it," she muttered before apparating back to Riddle Manor. She had warned him. She had told him that if he touched a hair on his head, there would be hell to pay. A few cracks behind her sounded, but she wanted only one thing. Technically, she didn't need to be here, but she had something to do before she went back to the chateau to check on Astoria. She stormed through the manor, knowing exactly where they would be. She could feel the congregation of magical energy in the usually empty ballroom. "Granger!" Draco called out behind her. Hermione threw the doors open with enough force that half the room turned to look at her, including Tom, who broke out in grin at her appearance but faltered when she pointed her wand straight at Tiberius, who had not turned at her arrival, but did turn at the confusion on his master's face. "Crucio!" she hissed under her breath in immense effort, and the man dropped suddenly, not having time to react to the assault. Her wand did not waver as she stomped over to him. She could feel that her energy was nearly entirely gone. Between the potion that morning and the raid on the shopping center, she knew she was headed for a pretty awful come down. But there would be no way she waited to deal with this. "Granger!" Draco shouted, and he finally caught up and took in the situation. Hermione ignored him and kicked Tiberius straight in the jaw. Blood flew from his mouth as his head recoiled from the blow. She went to kick him again, but Draco's arms wrapped around her waist from behind her, trapping her arms and lifting her up and away from the oldest knot. It, rather unfortunately, caused the curse on him to drop too. "Stop!" she shrieked at Draco, her nails digging into a part of him that she could find purchase on, attempting to kick at him as he turned her away and toward Daphne. "He tried to kill Theo. Let me fucking go." At those words, he froze, still holding her up in the air. "What did you just say?" Daphne breathed. The entire room had fallen silent as they watched the commotion unfold. Tom had begun making his way down the makeshift podium as he sat up and toward where they were. "He tried to Avada Theo, and I lost Kingsley because I chose to save Theo instead," Hermione screeched. Draco dropped her, causing her to stumble into Daphne, who caught her. She turned just in time to see Draco's fist colliding with Tiberius's face. "Draco!" Tom barked as he finally approached. "That is enough. We will deal with this tomorrow, but now is not the time." Draco sneered down at the man, grabbing him by the cuff of the shirt. "You better watch yourself, Tibby. I'm fucking coming for you." His tone was icy cold as he hissed in the man's face before shoving him away again and standing to bow to Tom. "My lord, I apologize for the intrusion." Tom's brown eyes passed to her, and after a moment they softened, and he sighed. Yes, we will discuss tomorrow. Hermione, Draco." He nodded his head and swept away from them. Hermione glared down at Tiberius and lunged to kick him again, but Draco once again scooped her up and turned her away, shoving her gently toward the door. "Go home," he whispered at her with a look that told her he wasn't fucking around. She thought for a moment about ignoring him, of standing her ground in defiance simply because he told her to go. But she could feel the crash coming on quickly, and perhaps she imagined it, but she could have sworn that she saw concern in his eyes, as if he somehow knew that she was fading fast too. She huffed and stormed from the room, his single word of "Daff" following her out. "I got her." Daphne jogged to catch up to her, and Hermione fought to roll her eyes. "I don't need a fucking babysitter," Hermione snapped, with a little more bite than she intended. Daphne appeared unbothered by the attitude and nodded. "I know, but it will make Dee feel better if he thinks that you're taken care of. Repayment for Theo, or whatever." Hermione doubted that even Daphne believed her words. It sounded like the kind of placating bullshit you told toddlers to prevent a temper tantrum. Oddly enough, she couldn't bring herself to care or argue the point any further. She didn't complain when Daphne took her elbow and apparated her several times across the country. She could barely remember walking back across the yard and the patio or into the house, but she must have done so because at some point she collapsed onto the lounge suite. After that, everything else just faded away. Sunshine shone on her face softly as she managed to blink her eyes open. She was met with a sight that shocked her speechless for a moment. Draco Malfoy stood there with his hands in his pockets, staring out the window. His hair had grown in the weeks she had been here, not by much, but enough that it was noticeable. She looked around her and realized that she was not in her bed or on the Chase lounge, but in what happened to be Draco's room. She peered down and saw that she was wearing a pair of black satin pajamas and frowned in confusion. "Pansy lent them to Ginny, who changed you," Draco explained nonchalantly. "Oh, and I'm in your room because..." Her voice came out softly, but in the space it sounded loud to her ears. "We couldn't get permission to enter yours." He turned to face her and rested against the windowsill. "Okay, then why not Ginny's room?" Draco raised an eyebrow at her, a playful glint appearing in his eyes. "Do you take issue with being in my bed, Granger?" Hermione fought a smirk. "No, I'm simply curious." Draco hummed with a smile that sent butterflies flipping in her stomach. "Oh no, those would need to be squashed. Sexual attraction was one thing, but butterflies was another thing entirely. Butterflies meant feelings, and feelings were not something that she wanted, especially not with a man who clearly couldn't even decide if he wanted her or not. Ginny specifically said her room was out of action as she intended to be having a lot of sex last night. Blaise told Theo that he could crash out in his room as Astoria was still asleep in the middle of their bed, so Theo did not want to disturb her. Daphne and Pansy informed me that Astoria had recently started renovating the guest rooms, which to my surprise all look as though they have suddenly been blasted with a Bombarda Maxima, which brings us to this current situation. Hermione chuckled. Seems like it was a rather unfortunate coincidence then. I slept on the couch, just so you don't think I did anything untoward. His tone had shifted to a darker, more husky element, and the butterflies jumped again. I didn't think that, Hermione reassured him. I could have stayed there, on the couch. I meant my couch in any case. No, you couldn't have. You were taking up half the couch, and we wanted to be in there. Plus, you were snoring. Hermione gasped and grabbed her pillow beside her and threw it as hard as she could at the man. It was pointless because he caught it without any effort whatsoever. I was not, she exclaimed. Draco grinned at her in amusement. You realize that there are 5 people who live in this house who will back me up on that, right? Hermione stiffened. 4, she said, as if it were a fact. 5, Draco argued, holding up his hand, the veins in his arm and hand flexing. It was an odd thing to affect her in the way that it did, causing her to rub her legs together. But if he noticed the shifting of the blankets, he didn't say anything. Daphne, his index finger pointed to the other hand's thumb. Pansy, he moved along one, his grin becoming more smug as he continued. Theo, Blaise, and Ginny. Wrong. Ginny will side with me and defend my honor even when I'm wrong. Draco rolled his tongue along his teeth slowly. The playful smirk made her abdomen burn. Yes, of course. I forgot that you two have been slumming it with the order and no longer possess decent moral compasses. Hermione snorted. The irony of that statement. She shook her head and threw the covers off of her. Thanks for the sleepover, Malfoy, she jested as she made her way for the door. Any time, Granger, Draco answered softly. Hermione wasted no time turning up the stairs and towards Ginny's room, banging her fist against the wood until the door was yanked open by a disheveled-looking Ginny, wearing nothing but a robe and who grinned at her with pride. "Oh, look who it is, Sleeping Beauty. You look disappointingly well-rested." "You have permission to enter my room," Hermione stated, her eyes narrowed on the witch. Ginny chuckled. "Yes, I know. So then why did you not levitate me into my own bed? Why have everyone play the game of musical beds? Who blew up the guest rooms?" Further in Ginny's room, Blaze roared with laughter. "Theo!" Hermione nodded. "Of course it was. You all need to stop making bets on my damn sex life." Ginny snorted and gave her a pointed look. "Or lack thereof, you mean." Ginny," Hermione warned and pointed her finger at her before turning and strolling back downstairs. Pansy could wait to get her bloody pajamas back. Hermione wanted coffee, strong coffee, because despite the decent sleep, she still felt drained and she had things that she needed to sort out. Kingsley was turning out to be a real problem. She should have just killed him in that raid. Tiberius needed to be put down as soon as possible, like a rabid dog he was. Hermione needed to prepare for the dinner with Tony, and she really, really needed to get the rings made for her housemates. Music from the wireless floated out from the kitchen, along with the witch singing a little off-key. Hermione rounded the corner, and Astoria immediately stopped and turned with a huge grin on her face. "Hey, baby, how are you?" the blonde exclaimed loudly and bounced across the kitchen, dropping the spatula on the stove beside the pan to pull Hermione into a suffocating hug instead. Theo, who had been leaning on the counter watching her with awe, smiled and silently picked up the spatula to pick up where Astoria had left off. "Tor, let the poor girl breathe," Pansy joked from the dining table. Not that it stopped Astoria from rocking Hermione and herself from side to side. "I am glad to see you are feeling better," Hermione sighed. The blonde had been even peppier than usual. "I am, and it's all thanks to you." Astoria grinned, finally stepping back and poking Hermione lightly in the shoulder. "Best I've felt in years." Astoria dragged the emphasis out on the word and bounced back over to the frying pan where Theo was flipping an omelet. "Woke up, was sick once, really badly, and then all better," she chirped. Hermione didn't know what to say. She was not used to this level of cheerfulness, even from Astoria, who was by nature a peppy person. Hermione looked to Pansy with wide eyes, silently pleading for her to help, while Daphne scoffed and sipped her coffee.